again, everybody. It is time once again for another episode of the Silver Bullets podcast. I am Michael Citro.
And I'm Chip Minnich.
And Chip, we got to see the Ohio State Buckeyes finally win one comfortably as they defeated the Akron Zips 59-7. And I will commend you, sir, for your prediction of 56-7 because that's pretty darn close.
I appreciate that, Michael. I guessed that Ohio State. I mean, it was one of these things. I know that there was a lot of concern. I think would be probably the appropriate term after Akron marched down the field and scored that touchdown. But I had every confidence that Ohio State was going to be able to take care of business and be able to pretty much dictate the final score. So thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, no, I mean, you earned it. You earned it with the prediction. You were only 3 points off. And I was early in this game, Chip, I would tell you that my prediction of Akron scoring 13, I thought, wow, did I predict too low for Akron? Because we saw a lot of the same stuff, completing passes on third and long. We saw successful runs. We saw missed tackles. We saw I don't know if they were missed assignments or blown coverages or whatever in the secondary, but early on in this game, I will tell you, I was not convinced that even against Akron that this defense was going to get any better.
One of the things that I thought was very puzzling on behalf of Akron, I know that they knew they were going into this game, facing an uphill battle talent-wise. I was genuinely surprised that they didn't go for it when on their first series. I mean, like that they decided to, punted instead of, going for it because, I mean, it wasn't going to get any easier. But yeah, it was the first part of the game, it was very, very concerning to see Akron having little to no difficulty moving the ball against the Ohio State defense.
Yeah, and we saw early on in the game, obviously Kyle Mccord gets the start for Ohio State in place of the injured C.J. Stroud. And we had talked last week about C.J. Stroud's shoulder and how maybe it would be a good time to get him some rest. And Ryan Day liked your idea, Chip.
Well, the thing about Kyle Mccord, I mean, he came out and naturally, I mean, you're talking, I think the announced attendance was north of 95,000 people. First game, true freshman, night game, was not looking too good at the onset, but he settled down. And I think, if anything, I am in that same sentiment that I think a lot of our colleagues within Buckeye Scoop have is he played well. I thought Jack Miller played well, but I don't think either of them moved the needle, so to speak, to the point where it's going to generate a quarterback controversy for Ryan Day. Now, we'll see this coming weekend. As we're recording this, no announcement has been made. Who's to say that C.J. Stroud, that maybe his shoulder is still bothering him? It's entirely possible that Coach Day wants to give him another week to rest. But the larger point I'm trying to make is that I think it is very reassuring as an Ohio State fan knowing that both Kyle McCord and Jack Miller played well when given the opportunity. And I think Ohio State fans should kind of know that, all right, they have quarterbacks who are more than capable of leading this team in C.J. Stroud's absence.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We do know that CJ would have been able to play if needed in this game, which tells me that a road game at Rutgers next week is probably CJ's game because even if he's a little dinged, I think Ryan Day might feel a little bit more comfortable having CJ out there on the road against Rutgers than trying to play Kyle McCord. Now, I will say, too, that, and we'll get to the champions in a few minutes, but neither of the quarterbacks who played for Ohio State on Saturday graded out as champions. Of course, there was an interception for Mccord, and he did start erratically, and Ryan Day did say he made some young mistakes, and I think maybe Jack Miller didn't get enough maybe attempts to try to warrant getting a champion grade because he didn't throw the ball a whole lot, but we'll get to that. So Akron gets on the board first, Chip, halfway through the first quarter, and the Akron Zips are leading not 3-0, 7-0. Mumpfield 4-yard pass from DJ Irons, and that had to just bring a great deal of joy all across the country to Ohio State haters when that score scrolled across the bottom of their screen.
Oh, certainly. And maybe I'm in the minority here. Maybe you agree with me. It kind of, I realized, completely different opponent, completely different time of day, completely different set of circumstances. But it kind of reminded me of a couple years ago when Miami University jumped out on a lead against Ohio State. Now, granted, Ohio State was much more dominant defensively the rest of the game and the rest of the season in 2019 than they have shown so far in 2021. But in certain ways, I thought the way Akron came out and was able to kind of do whatever, I don't want to say whatever they wanted, but with minimal resistance from Ohio State. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it certainly seemed as though Ohio State really kind of regrouped and played with a much better focus and intensity on the defensive side of the ball than we have seen in the previous games.
Yeah, I would say so. That would be it for Akron's scoring in this game. But as you mentioned, Kyle McCord came out very nervous, was throwing erratically all over. I would say much more erratically than C.J. Stroud did when he first started. But it was, one of those passes was a backward pass, and it was and that could have been a really bad turnover and could have been a scoring play for Akron had the ball bounced a little differently. So tough start for him. Akron comes down and scores 7-0, and now Ohio State, you've made them mad, and now you're going to pay for it. The scoring started and almost didn't stop. It only stopped because Ohio State started just running the ball and taking care of the clock. But Chris Olave scored on a 5-yard pass, one of those little pop passes from Mccord, his first career collegiate touchdown pass. Chris Olave back on the board, starting his next streak. And this was, I believe it was number 25 in his career, which moved him into a tie with Santonio Holmes for Chris Olave for touchdown receptions.
And this is just my opinion. I was kind of surprised, getting back to the whole Kyle McCord start. And maybe it's just me. I really thought, okay, full well, as Coach Day, full well that this kid, that his heart is beating, so many hundred things per minute. I just don't understand why. I realize he has to throw at some point. I think start the kid off with handoffs, for God's sakes. Just let's let it. Okay, let's let the butterflies, whatever kind of hyperbole we want to use, they're in overdrive. I don't care. We were just speaking positively about Jack Miller. I don't care who you put back there. That first set of plays. All right, let's just let's just get. Hopefully the emotions calm down a little bit. I think he'd still be amped, but I'm kind of surprised that they don't run the ball to try and soothe the nerves, so to speak, of whoever the quarterback is. Because all three of them that we're going to see in 2021, Coach Day keeps saying it, and we all know it to be true. They're all inexperienced. So just why don't you give them something to kind of help them settle their nerves at the beginning of the game?
Right. Well, in fairness, the first play was a handoff to TreVeyon Henderson, and he took it for a first down. And probably Ryan Day figures, well, they're going to have butterflies on that first pass anyway. Let's get it out of the way. So,
sure.
So maybe that was the thinking there. But Olave scores to tie the game at 7, and then before the end of the quarter, TreVeyon Henderson with a 3-yard run to make it 14-7, and that was pretty much game, set, match. In the second quarter, Jackson Smith-Njigba scored on a 34-yard pass. That was probably the best pass that Mccord threw all night, as he gave his receiver a chance to adjust to the ball while the defensive back's back was turned, and a nice adjustment by Smith-Njigba to haul that in and back into the end zone. Travion Henderson scored from 14 yards out, and then Ronnie Hickman scored on a 46-yard pick six. And they weren't done yet, though, because the Buckeyes used their timeouts late on defense. Didn't have much time, but a deep ball to Garrett Wilson set them up in field goal range, and Noah Ruggles kicked a 32-yard field goal. And at the half, Ohio State up 38-7, and you felt all kinds of good at that point, except not me, because I'm the grumpy old Buckeye, and I didn't have that many things written down. So I was like, well, man, I need some more stuff here.
Of course, yeah. Like how dare they only be up 38-7? No, I think again, it was one of these things. We talked about it last week. Certainly, my thoughts and feelings haven't changed about it. Is that on the positive side, this is the kind of performance that Ohio State fans have been hoping for, had been expecting, not only against Akron, but let's face it, like they thought, the previous week against Tulsa. I would venture to guess there were probably a segment of the Ohio State fans who thought similar results could have possibly happened on the road at Minnesota in the season opener. So on one hand, you've got, okay, this is exactly what you've been hoping for. Put me in the category of, I don't want to say this isn't pessimism, but I think I'm going to refer to it as realism, in the sense that you have to take this result at more than just like at scoreboard face value, in the sense that, okay, you were playing against one of the worst teams in Division I football, so you don't the results. Yeah, I'm pleased with them, but you have to keep them, try and gain some kind of semblance of perspective when you're looking at the fact that they were drilling Akron.
Sure. Ohio State scores 3 touchdowns in the second half. In the third quarter, a couple of Master Teague touchdown runs, as it was basically mostly ground game with some passes sprinkled in. Mccord did start the second half, and as Ryan Day was trying to get him to finish on a good note, then he threw an interception, so then he had to put him back out again. So Master Teague with a couple touchdowns, 52-7 after 3, and then we got an Evan Pryor sighting in his first career touchdown late to make it 59-7. And I will say that, yeah, it's Akron and they're a bad team, but I would say most years when Ohio State is playing Ohio State level football, a 59-7 win over Akron is about what you would expect most years. Maybe a few more points, if you have a more experienced quarterback.
Certainly. And again, I think where Akron fell on the schedule, that, the fact that, all right, you're talking game 4 versus, let's say like the first game or the second game, I think the fact that Ohio State has so many issues defensively, they've had issues in terms of that they seem to have clarified with the running game. We've been discussing the quarterback passing game, all those kind of things. Akron is usually one of those games where it's like, oh, if it's game 1, it's like, okay, now we know what we have to work on. It just so happened to fall in week 4. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like you're trying to address a lot of the things that you've already identified. So a win is a win. I think Akron, I think that they, are in for a long season within the MAC. But I'm glad Ohio State took care of business against the Zips.
Yeah, it was 622 yards of total offense for Ohio State, 229 for Akron. On a normal Ohio State year against this bad of an Akron team, probably the offense is not too much different, but the defense probably gives up 150 or fewer yards in most years against this Akron team. And part of the problem, too, with Ohio State on Saturday, 8 penalties for 95 yards. That's not going to make anybody happy on the coaching staff. But that's the way it ended. Let's check in on our picks to click. You had two guys who made a big play on each side of the ball, but I would say overall didn't click because they didn't make enough plays. You had Cody Simon, who had an interception. I think he had like one tackle, maybe. And Emeka Egbuka, who had one reception, but he took it for 85 yards. Did not get in the end zone, but pretty impressive run after the catch for the freshman.
Yeah, I thought. I mean, it was kind of a I don't want to call it a crime. That would be too severe of a phrase, but you know, it was just a shame that Buka. I mean, he really looked impressive. The run after the catch, the fact that he wasn't able to bring it in for a touchdown, but I think both of them showed that they have very bright futures. And I thought I agree with what you just said. They didn't make enough plays, but I think it's going to be nice to see what they do for the remainder of 2021 and beyond.
Yeah. My picks to click on offense, Master Teague, 8 carries, 71 yards, 2 touchdowns. I'm going to call that a click, 8.9 yards per carry. And on defense, oh my goodness, did my man click, Haskell Garrett, second on the team in tackles with 5 and 3, count them, 3 sacks.
And that's the kind of performance that I think that Ohio State fans kind of have been, I don't want to say expecting, but hoping for so far in 2021. I'm glad that he did it. I mean, again, you know, I'm going to follow my own advice from a moment ago. Let's keep things in perspective. It was against Akron. Would love to see that same kind of performance this coming weekend against Rutgers or any other Big Ten opponent, because the Ohio State defense certainly needs it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's definitely something that you would want to see against better opponents. And this is how we expected Haskell Garrett to play throughout the season. And it hasn't been there yet. There's been a lack of fire. Maybe there's a little too much fire at times from this team on Saturday, as there were some big hits, and then we get hit with a taunting penalty after one of those big hits, and some of these guys getting on the field for maybe the first time for a lot of these guys, and they were a little excitable, but it was nice to see guys out there making plays. And I will tell you this before we move on. We've talked about the defense almost exclusively on this show since the season began. I think what I saw from Steel Chambers on Saturday was impressive enough for me to want to see more of Steel Chambers.
I agree with you. And I know we're moving on, but I'm not going to be surprised if we do see more of Steel Chambers.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to perform on this defense, you should get more snaps, because there's not been a lot of performing. One of the areas of concern, obviously still even through Akron, is defensive ends not getting pressure, not getting sacks. I don't know what's going on with the defensive ends, but they're not getting to where they need to be. And, all of the sacks, well, not all of them, but most of the sacks this year have come from the defensive tackles, and that's you're going to need a little bit more help outside.
Completely agree. Something has to improve.
Yeah. So we're getting to see a lot more of Jack Sawyer. We're getting to see a lot more of JT Tuimoloau, and those two combined had 5 tackles on the day. Sawyer did have a sack. That was nice to see. Tuimoloau, who is obviously he got here later than Jack Sawyer, but another freshman, is a talented guy. He did get caught on one of those read options, get caught inside, and DJ Irons, victimized him for a decent run on the outside. So these kids are learning, but they've got to be a little better. And I expected a lot more from Zach Harrison, even though I didn't expect him to play a lot of snaps. I definitely thought I would see maybe one of those big plays where he comes around the edge and clobbers the quarterback and causes a strip sack, but we did not see that from Zach Harrison.
No, I mean, Zach Harrison, I think we've always been intrigued and excited by the potential, but so far it just hasn't really materialized on the field.
Yeah. So Kyle Mccord was named Big Ten Freshman of the Week. That's good to see. Pretty good numbers overall for Kyle. May as well just run through those real quick. He went 13 of 18 with an interception, 2 touchdowns, 319 yards. He was sacked twice. Jack Miller was 5 of 8 for 66 yards, no touchdowns or interceptions, and he was not sacked. So I thought both kids played pretty well, but it could have been better, and those guys are just going to get better and better. They're very raw, so we'll see how it goes from this point forward. But I would expect that as soon as CJ is healthy enough to be in, I expect him to be in.
Yeah, I agree. I think as we're recording this, again, no news has been given, but all indications seem to be pointing towards CJ Stroud returning to the starting lineup.
All right. Well, let's run through our champions for this week and our players of the game before we get to this week's guest. Against Akron on defense, the champions were Haskell Garrett, Ronnie Hickman, Steele Chambers, Taraja Mitchell, and player of the game Tyleek Williams, who really is coming on.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I completely agree. It's very, I don't want to say surprising, because the rumblings out of, during the winter conditioning and spring ball were that, he was really impressing the coaches. But I guess you could say, based on, all the, I don't want to call it hype, the recruiting rankings and things like that, he didn't have nearly the accolades of of JTT or Jack Sawyer. So yeah, it's great to see. It's great to see that he's performing so well.
He's. I'm going to start calling him. I have to have a nickname for him. So, we had Big Hank, we had Big Daddy. Maybe he could be Little Daddy. I don't know. He's not that little.
No, he is not.
He might be. He is not. He might be bigger than Big Daddy.
I don't know.
Dan Wilkinson.
That was. I mean, you want to talk about somebody that just commanded, double teams on that interior, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I think this kid's going to be the same way. He looks like he fits the bill. He's checking all the boxes, and he's still very, very young. On offense, the entire starting lineup, or starting offensive line, graded out as champions: Luke Whippler, Paris Johnson, Nicholas Petit-Frere, Matthew Jones stepping in for Thayer Munford, and we had also Master Teague, Travion Henderson, Jeremy Ruckert, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, and the co-players of the game on offense, DeJuan Jones and Garrett Wilson for the Buckeyes, and then special teams player of the game, grading out as champion, obviously, Jesse Mirko.
Yeah, I mean, the offensive line is playing well. I'm not surprised that Matthew Jones has risen to the occasion. I'm kind of curious to see, because Ryan Day is so tight-lipped about injuries, and that's fine, is if Matthew Jones is going to start this coming weekend at Rutgers.
Yeah, that will be interesting to see. I think they said Thayer is not a long-term thing, but not long-term could be 2-3 weeks. So
right,
we'll see how it goes. All right, Chip, we will talk a little bit more about the Buckeyes in just a few moments. Of course, we'll take our lap around the Big Ten results, and we will come back at the end of the show with our Rutgers preview, and we'll give our picks to click then, and we'll give our score predictions. But we've got a guest to come on with us and talk a little bit about the Scarlet Knights and a little bit about their tussle with the Michigan Wolverines, and we'll get to that right after this. All right, joining us on the Silver Bullets podcast this week, we're happy to have with us one of the managing editors over at On the Banks, a Rutgers Scarlet Knights blog on SB Nation. It's Greg Patuto. Greg, thanks for coming back here on the Silver Bullets podcast.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me back on.
So I want to start our interrogation of you, if you will, with a little bit about your overall thoughts on the Rutgers start to the season, I think it's been pretty impressive, and I watched almost all of the game against Michigan on Saturday, and just wanted to get your thoughts on where this team is. Are they legit? And, are we going to see this team continue to be in games against, top opposition all season? Or did we see maybe the first chink in the armor on Saturday?
As for, where the team is, they're moving in the right direction. Greg Schiano's clearly the right man for the job. And just by looking at how they're playing, their discipline early on, they only have one turnover on the season, and that came at the end of the Michigan game. They're one of the least penalized teams so far to begin the season through 4 weeks. And the start's been impressive. It's about what I thought was going to happen. I expected them to win the first 3 games of their non-conference schedule, heading into Big Ten, kind of getting their feet wet, ready for, the tougher competition. And they exceeded my expectations against that Michigan team, especially in the second half where they really dominated the final 30 minutes of that game. Moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see if they can keep it up. And really this week against Ohio State is going to be the big tell. I think they could definitely compete with teams in the Big Ten and play the style they did on Saturday. But obviously Ohio State's been the class, and that's going to be, the biggest test of the year.
So the question I have is, like Michael, I watched, and I was very impressed with what I saw Rutgers do on the road at Michigan. I thought in a lot of ways, we can talk about it, that there were, obviously lamenting missed opportunities. But one of the things that caught my eye was on the defensive side of the ball, Rutgers crowding the line of scrimmage and then dropping back. And I guess the question I have is this something that you think that they did that specifically for Michigan, or is this kind of, kind of a defensive strategy that they have to try and confuse the opponent?
Yeah, I think this is something they did for Michigan. With how good they run the ball, they were able to control the line of scrimmage, and to do it without Julius Turner, who was ejected in his second quarter for that targeting call, which was, questionable at best, but that's a different conversation entirely. It was really impressive what they were able to do, and their linebackers that are the strength, with Fatukasi and Tyshawn Fogg. They have a lot of different ways that they can defend teams, and Michigan kind of played into their strength, being a running team. They did well controlling that. For me, it's going to be interesting to see what they do against a team that kind of likes to air it out a bit more, and we should really find that out, into this coming week against Ohio State.
So, Greg, the maturation, I guess, is a good word for it, of Noah Vedral seems to be have taken another level this year. He's been very efficient. He's completing 68% of his passes, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. What is he as a quarterback? Do you see him as a game manager? Do you see him as a legitimate starter in a Power 5 conference? Where does Noah fall on the quarterback scale, I guess is what I'm asking you.
I think he's a starter. He's got the talent. With him, it was about consistency, and we saw that last year in the 9 games that he played. He was very inconsistent, turning the ball over, making poor decisions, not knowing when to use his legs, when to pull it down, when to throw it away, different aspects of the game like that. This year, we're seeing him be more decisive. They're still running that fast-paced style offense that Sean Gleason implemented, but they're giving him a lot more safer throws. The quick screens to the outside, that's kind of a running play. It's an extension of the run game, and he's not forcing as much into double coverage or as much down the field. Now, I would like to see him stretch the field a little more when he has those chances, to guys like Aaron Cruikshank and Bo Melton. But as of now, we're seeing in his second year with the same offensive coordinator, Rutgers brought all their coaches back. We're seeing a quarterback who's taking that next step, who's becoming smarter, and it's shown greatly with just the 1 fumble through 4 games as the only turnover that the team has so far.
So I want to stay on the defensive side of the ball, and that is something that you mentioned as it relates to Ohio State, as you describe them, more pass oriented offensively. Another thing that's very positive about Rutgers so far this season, the play of their secondary. Can you talk about, because they have been playing extremely well in terms of capitalizing on turnovers and, some things that Ohio State fans need to be aware of going into the game at Rutgers on Saturday afternoon.
Yes, the defense has been doing a great job taking the ball away. The secondary has been playing well. The depth is definitely a concern coming into the year. That was a problem, but their starting group has been very, very strong. There's the whole issue with Max Melton, with him being suspended, which was a big hit. But the secondary has really overperformed my expectations coming into the season. But again, the depth concerns me and how they're going to kind of defend Ohio State heading into this matchup with, Olave and Garrett Wilson, who for my money might be, 1 and 2 in terms of best receivers in the country. So it's going to be interesting to see how that matchup falls.
I'm not going to let Chip get all the questions in about the defense, so I'm going to ask one now myself. 14 sacks through 4 games is pretty impressive. How is Greg Schiano attacking the passing game? It looks like some of these are linebackers who are blitzing. Does he blitz a lot? Has he been staying a lot of base? How is Rutgers attacking opposing quarterbacks?
Yeah, you're right about the linebackers too. Fachikasi, he leads the team in sacks so far, being their best defensive player. And it's really been mixing it up. They don't throw a ton of blitzes out because they have linebackers who can do multiple things. So they use their versatility in different ways. But their defensive line as a whole has really been impressive, getting a push and being able to get in the backfield, whether it's getting after the quarterback or stopping the run game. So this has opened up a lot of different opportunities for Rutgers to play. Schiano he's got a lot of ideas. He's throwing a lot of different looks out there. And it's nice that he has the personnel to kind of do all of this stuff. Like I said, versatility-wise, especially at the linebacker position.
So to prove to Michael that I'm not a one-trick pony, I will switch over to the offense. And, if anything, what I also was impressed, Michael talked earlier and you answered some questions about Noah Vedral is the run-pass option. Because this is something that, as an Ohio State fan, I'm sure you're aware that Ohio State defensively has had their issues. It certainly seemed from what I saw against Michigan, the run pass option is alive and well for Rutgers, and that's a critical part of their offensive attack.
Yeah, it definitely is. That fits into their fast-paced style. They like to run. And again, having the personnel to do so. Vedral is a quarterback who's able to use his legs, which is a big factor in the offense that they've implemented over these last 2 years with Gleason and Vedral coming back-to-back seasons. And they've been doing it well. And I think a huge part of that, again, to harp on this, is the decision-making by Vedral, knowing when to do what aspect on the offensive end. And if he's making the right decisions, the RPOs, it opens it up for so many more options, and the defense has to think about that much more. So moving forward, I think that's only going to improve into Big Ten play as this team, matures over the course of the season.
One other player who I've been impressed with watching for Rutgers, and I haven't seen the first 3 games, but I did see the Michigan game, and Isaiah Pacheco, 20 carries for 107 yards, and that's easily his best output of the season. What has Pacheco been like prior to the Michigan game? Have they just not been using him as much, or was he maybe a little banged up to start the season? Because he really looked good against Michigan.
Yeah, Pacheco's a tough runner. He's been the starter for this team for a couple of years now, and he's really a huge X factor. He was a guy I talked about a lot coming into the season because of Rutgers' need to get the run game going. I just think that's so important, especially in the Big Ten, for a team like Rutgers, when you want to be on the field, you want to rest your defense, and obviously keep high-powered offenses, such as Ohio State coming up. You want to keep them on the sidelines. So to do that, you got to get the run game going. And Pacheco, he had a slower start to the season. Schiano was, switching a lot of guys in and out, giving some other guys chances. Plus, there were 2 lopsided games, Temple and Delaware. So, rest here and there late in the game. But against Michigan, he showed what he can do, and really the offensive line as a whole has been impressive. This is an experienced group that's coming back, and they've played well, and that's led to Pacheco's success.
I want to switch it up a little bit and talk about just the talent that I know that, Greg Schiano was not shy about using the transfer portal. Obviously, the recruiting has really, in terms of within the state of New Jersey, but to give Coach Schiano some props for trying to reach into Ohio. I know that in 2021, Rutgers signed a number of players from the state of Ohio. I mean, this isn't my main question. Braden Fox, the last name is very familiar to any Ohio State fan. I know Michael and I, we're very familiar with Braden's uncle as well as his father. Both being former Buckeyes. Braden Fox didn't stick with his Rutgers commitment, but I guess my larger question is, how successful has Coach Schiano been at recruiting players from within the state of Ohio due to his time at Ohio State?
He's been very successful, in recruiting as a whole. And it's funny, he mentioned all the talent in New Jersey, and that's obviously his number one priority, obviously with Rutgers being in New Jersey, and all the talent that is here he's trying to keep home. But he's really highlighted other states as well, big into Florida, big into Ohio, as you mentioned, Pennsylvania, and just the states up here. He's really made it a point of emphasis to branch out once he kind of nailed down into the work he had to do into New Jersey and getting some of the top players here to stay home. So I definitely think it's a huge factor. He's got the groundwork in Ohio from his days, at Ohio State, and he's really been showing that that's a state he's been aggressive on, and I think that's going to continue, during his time at Rutgers.
And what happened with Braden Fox? Why I didn't mean to cut you off, Michael, but what happened with Braden Fox? Like he signed and then he entered the transfer portal without even, I was just curious what the backstory was, if you know it.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about it, to be quite honest, but that's basically what it sounds like to me. I don't have all the information on that.
Okay. That's fine.
Greg, when you look at the start that Ohio State has had to this season, obviously struggling mightily on defense to start the year, some changes the last couple of weeks. We're not really sure how effective those changes have been because of the level of the competition. Obviously, Tulsa still didn't look very good. It looked better against Akron, but Akron isn't a very good football team. But when you look at those struggles, and you've got a veteran offensive line, a quarterback who's been efficient, a good wide receivers, and a good running back, how much optimism do you have as a Rutgers fan when you've got Ohio State come into your place and they might be vulnerable, especially with a backup possibly a backup freshman quarterback playing, possibly a starting freshman quarterback playing, and a defense that has been struggling.
There's some optimism coming from, the state of New Jersey as a whole. Everyone's saying if they're going to, sneak up on Ohio State, this is the year to do it. They're coming up to Piscataway, and there's been some question marks. But to me, Ohio State, obviously, they're still the class of the Big Ten. And despite their struggles defensively, this is going to be a very, very telling game, I think, for both teams, because as impressive as Rutgers has been, they're taking that next step, Federal especially. Their offense has still been a work in progress to me. Pacheco really had the one breakout game against Michigan. I mentioned their struggles to kind of push the ball down the field more to their big play guys. So Ohio State's going to have some room to make plays. And to me, it's going to be interesting if Pacheco could get as comfortable running the ball as Oregon did during their when they beat Ohio State.
So I guess a question I have, because you mentioned his name, rightfully so, Fedukasi, at weak side linebacker, arguably one of the best linebackers in the conference, and is widely regarded as a top NFL prospect. Do you look at as like a possible, I don't want to call it matchup issue, but I like, some kind of a, like a strategy that Rutgers might have is like moving him around to try to, take advantage of, Ohio State, in passing situations, Fatukasi, rushing the passer?
I think it's definitely a possibility. I think that they have to get the ball out quick. They're going to have to make Ohio State get the ball out quick in this game because, like I said, when you have two receivers like that on the outside, anything could happen. You could get beaten so many ways. And Fatukasi is the kind of player who can do multiple things. He can get to the quarterback if he needs to. He could drop out coverage. And when he gets his hands on you, you're not going anywhere. He's one of the most, short tacklers in the conference and in the country. So it's going to be interesting to me how they use him and really their game plan as a whole. Because like I said, I expect a little more pressure in this game to make Ohio State throw the ball quick.
All right, Greg, before we let you get out of here, I just want to get your thoughts on where this game is going to be won or lost on Saturday and ask if you've got a score prediction.
To me, it's Rutgers on the defensive side of the ball. Can they get stops? Because, again, Ohio State can put up points in bunches despite the two freshman quarterbacks. Some have said some have liked what Stroud has done so far. Some haven't. They think he's inconsistent. But, again, there's so many weapons at the skill positions. And Stroud and Mccord have both showed arm talent. So it's really going to be if Rutgers can get some stops because they're not going to win a game against Ohio State that's playing the 40s. As for a score prediction, I can see something along the lines of, 38-17 type. I think it's still a decent win for Ohio State. Despite Rutgers coming off feeling good against Michigan, their offense still had their struggles. So I think Ohio State takes care of business in this game. But for Rutgers and Rutgers fans, it's going to be interesting to see how they match up because, this is the year if they're going to keep within range, this is going to be the year to do it.
All right, Greg Patuto from On the Banks, managing editor over there. Where can folks find you and your work on the internet?
Yes, just onthebanks.com over at SB Nation. That's where we have all of our post-game work, our pre-game work, predictions, power rankings, wherever you need, just onthebanks.com.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate you having me.
And we're back, Chip, and once again, thanks to Greg Patuto from On the Banks. He was great. I appreciate him taking some time to tell us a little bit about the Scarlet Knights.
And I completely agree. Not only thanks to Greg, I completely agree that in that assessment that Rutgers, they certainly are well within a reasonable thought that if this is the year to this might be the year to catch Ohio State because they certainly have improved and Ohio State is certainly not shown that they are nearly as dominant as they usually are when they're playing the Scarlet Knights.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm a little concerned about Isaiah Pacheco and Vedral in the run pass option game against what we've seen from this Ohio State defense so far this year. I think he's selling Rutgers short if he thinks 17 points. I guess it's possible if some of the things we saw against Akron will translate into better competition, then I guess it's possible. But I think Rutgers scores more than 17, and it was an interesting game to watch, and we can talk a little bit more about it in a bit. But I thought that Michigan looked to be one-dimensional on Saturday against Rutgers, and once Rutgers started stopping the run, it just didn't seem like Cade McNamara could beat them.
I agree with you. I think Rutgers, they certainly the days of we talked about it last year, and Rutgers so far what they have shown this year. I'm in the camp of I thought Rutgers made a lot of critical errors that they probably are lamenting. For what they did against Michigan, because I really thought that game was theirs for the taking.
Yeah, and the Rutgers, I thought Rutgers got they got homered a little bit. I think there was a play where Crookshanks was interfered with and
Yep.
probably cost Rutgers some points there. But yeah, good stuff. Before we do get to our trip around the Big Ten, though, Chip, a couple of big announcements just in the last few days since we last spoke. Dallas Gant has entered the transfer portal, and that kind of came out of nowhere. I expected to see more of Dallas Gant as the season went on, but apparently not happy and not waiting. He's in that transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very surprising based on going into the 2021 season. The expectation was that Dallas Gant was the heir apparent at middle linebacker. I mean, that's kind of what you were told by people within the program or close to the program. And then he suffered a foot injury in the spring. And that's when you started kind of wondering, okay, that's when, all right, well, who's going to play middle linebacker? And then all throughout the fall camp, you didn't hear too much about him. And then what we've seen defensively kind of makes you wonder, all right, well, maybe the coaches, there's just, I don't want to say a lack of confidence, but they weren't sure exactly where he fit in within the defensive scheme.
Yeah, so we wish him well, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's interesting when guys enter the portal in the middle of the season because you never know if an injury or two could happen, and you could end up not only playing the rest of the way, but then sort of staking your claim to that position. I mean, it's kind of how it can go. So I don't know what is to be gained by getting in that portal early, but he's in there. The other thing is just a bizarre event that happened on Saturday, which was in the second quarter. Apparently, there was a substitution package that Kayvon Pope didn't like, and he was called back off the field, and he basically just lost it and reportedly threw his gloves up into the stands and walked off and was escorted to the locker room. We ended up, Ryan Day didn't want to talk about it Saturday night, so on, I think it was Sunday, they announced that he was removed from the program and that he was still, get his scholarship, but he was no longer on the team. And then Monday, today, as we record this, Kayvon Pope had apologized and wished his teammates well, and said he was going to spend some time, this period of time working on his mental health, and we certainly wish him well with that. He definitely went off on Saturday. I mean, he was tweeting F Ohio State during the game, which is not something you normally see from a player, and wishing his teammates well. But clearly, he was very unhappy on Saturday. Some things were said. It got heated, and he's no longer on the team. I don't know if there's a window back, a path back onto the team, later. But it appears certainly that Kayvon Pope's time as a Buckeye is over with.
Yeah, it does. And like you said, very bizarre. I can only speak for myself in terms of the timeline as you described it, is, watching the game from home, and it wasn't something that you saw on television, but all of a sudden Twitter was just blowing up about, what had taken place. And I genuinely feel bad for Kayvon Pope. We just talked about Dallas Gant. I feel bad in the sense that for any of these players who, decide to transfer, obviously wish them well. I guess I'm in that school of thought where growing up, regardless of whether we're talking Dallas Gant or Kayvon Pope, or any of these players, that they, arguably that they were the best player from their community, probably, in any game that they participated in.
Yeah, and probably in their entire league for most of those guys.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, speaking of Kayvon Pope, just, prior to our recording tonight, his recruiting profile, he had scholarship offers from Alabama, from Clemson, from Florida State, among many others. So to come to Ohio State and be sitting behind linebackers like Pete Werner, like Justin Hilliard, like Tuff Borland, Baron Browning for years and years and years and getting spot playing time, and then coming into 2021 and, thinking, okay, well, now is my time. And then it didn't materialize. I'm sure that there were many, many heated conversations. I don't think this just was an isolated incident. I can only speculate that finally, as you said, being waved off in what he thought was supposed to be a substitution opportunity, that was, the proverbial the straw that broke the camel's back, for him to have that kind of a reaction. I wish him well wherever he winds up. As I said, same thing for Dallas Gant. But I also agree with something that, kind of the theory that Tom Orr has been discussing on some of the other podcasts with Buckeye Scoop, and that it seems as though we've been complimentary of a lot of the true freshmen. It certainly seems as though the youth movement has taken root within the defense, and the Ohio State coaches, in their quest to improve that defense, are figuring out, hey, regardless of whether we're talking in the secondary, like Denzel Burke, we were talking about Tyleik Williams on the defensive line, we're going to play the best player. We're going to play. And if that's a true freshman and they're going to make mistakes, we're going to learn from that, and we're going to grow from that. So maybe that's part of it, is that frustration that, I know the linebackers haven't really distinguished themselves. We were talking a few moments ago about Still Chambers, like the fact that a guy who made that decision is already starting to kind of distinguish himself as possibly being the best linebacker. So who knows what was said behind closed doors, but I can only wish the best for Kayvon Pope and Dallas Gant wherever they wind up.
Mm-hmm. And I will point out that James Laurinaitis said something interesting too on the broadcast, and that is that it would have driven him crazy to have been pulled off the field every few plays, because he feels that you get into a rhythm like a running back. As a linebacker, you feel like you get into a rhythm. You start to notice things that you saw earlier in the game. You find tells that, maybe the way a guy lines up, or maybe a certain stance or a certain formation will clue you in, and you'll go, oh yeah, I remember when they did that earlier, this happened, and then you can go and make a play. And if you're getting rotated out, you don't get that opportunity to make that play, and then someone else is coming in and they're having to see it for the first time, and so the same play can work multiple times. And I thought that was interesting, coming from a former Buckeye great linebacker, certainly a guy who probably would have never been substituted off, but I think we've talked a little bit about that, about how you don't get to see the patterns because you're off the field and on the field and off the field, and I know they're still searching for that magic combination, but I don't know that you ever find the magic combination unless you leave things alone for a while.
I agree. I mean, and, James Laurinaitis, I know precisely what you're talking about, because I heard the same thing, a 3-time All-American, who, he hardly ever came off the field, and rightfully so. It just seems as though that there's, I don't want to say that it's that, because there's certainly the talent is there. It just seems that there's a chemistry issue with this team on not just on the defensive side of the ball, but just overall. And I really am, I'm inclined to kind of agree with what I said earlier with Tom Orr's theory, that it seems as though like maybe like some of the true freshmen who were highly touted, Mark Pantoni supposedly said this is the best recruiting class that they've ever brought into Ohio State, and that's saying something. Mm-hmm. That maybe there's kind of a, what do you mean you're going to let this true freshman play instead of, I've paid my dues. I've been here for fill in the blank. Like I know we're talking about the linebackers, Seven Banks didn't play the first part of the season. And it sounds as though that there might have, like in terms of like practice issues, or I don't want to say attitude, but I don't know what, and Denzel Burke is showing, hey, he's showing signs of becoming a star. So yeah. I don't know what's going on, I mean, I'm not as close to it as like Tom or Gerd or, any of the other people affiliated on the beat with Buckeye Scoop. But I am inclined to agree that I think that there's kind of like a dynamic issue going on that has to be, I don't want to say fixed I think that there's some things going on that are kind of causing some uneasiness within that locker room.
Yeah, when you recruit as well as this team has over the last several years, these guys can't take anything for granted. They can't just assume, well, I was second team last year, the guy in front of me went off to the NFL, now it's my position. There ain't any of that right now. There is too much talent coming through the pipeline for you to take anything for granted. You have to perform, and if you don't perform, they're going to put someone else out there and see if they'll perform. And there's no room for egos here. They have to be. Honestly, this team has to take the same sort of approach that the wide receiver room took a couple of years ago when you had so much talent and all of it's now in the NFL. Even guys who seemingly didn't ever start or ever catch passes because they were blocking downfield for other guys like Terry McLaurin, for example. You have to check that ego at the door and just accept that you still have to work your butt off every day because the guys you are trying to beat out are as good as you are or maybe even better than you are. So there's no – it would be very easy to get in the doghouse if you take that kind of attitude. And like you, I'm not there on boots on the ground every day. But it definitely seems like there hasn't been – there's been something amiss on the defense, and there's probably not just one reason for that. Some of it's inexperience, some of it is chemistry, some of it is probably a little bit of, what do you mean? I thought this was my job, and now it's maybe not my job. And I think all of that stuff can affect a team. So they've got to get it ironed out. And if the solution is, okay, if you're not on board, you've just been passed on the depth chart. If that's the way that they're going to try to solve the problem, then eventually it will work itself out through graduations and transfers.
Yeah, and I want to, now that we're talking about it, I want to pay a compliment to Master Teague, because think about it. I mean, I know we're talking the majority of the issues are on the defensive side of the ball, but when you think about it, Master Teague, if he wanted to, he could have, had an outburst and, I can't believe, like I paid my dues and, all these things, not just with Travion Henderson, mind you. I mean, with Mayan Williams. Yeah. I mean, like we're talking two guys. Now, granted, Master Teague, I think he is, I think he has a vital role on this offense, not only near the goal line, but I think, he certainly has shown a willingness and an ability to come in if, called upon to, provide positive carries. But I think, I genuinely, I agree with you. I think that there's, it's like opportunity sometimes knocks very, very softly and can move very, very quickly by you. The idea that, okay, here's my time. And it's like, well, you didn't do anything with it and we're moving on. And, for a lot of these, everything you said chemistry wise, and let's not forget kind of what we've often been lamenting all season defensively, the coaching and the scheme, right? I mean, it just makes for a very unusual concoction that I think that the coaching staff and the players are trying to work their way through, and hopefully it will render some positive results for Ohio State in 2021.
Yeah, hopefully we're already starting to see them turn the corner. We talked about Steel Chambers. Another guy that looks very positive out there is Cam Martinez, another youngster. So if these guys are going to get the job done, they're going to be out there. And some of these guys that are getting more playing time the last two games have looked better than some of the other guys that were out there. And I will tell you this, and again, it is just Akron. But I think Ronnie Hickman is starting to get it. I think he's starting, the light's starting to come on for him.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. I think it's just one of these things where – he plays, I agree with something Ross Fulton said, it's kind of, instead of, calling him a bullet, calling him a strong safety or whatever. That being said, I agree with you. I think that Ronnie Hickman is definitely emerging as a bright spot on a defensive unit. I love the potential of Cam Martinez.
Mm-hmm.
I think he, in terms of just athletically, I think at that safety position, I don't think he really knows what he's doing. I'm saying that in a positive. I know it sounds like an insult. It's not meant like that. I don't think he knows everything he's supposed to be doing, but at least he's doing it very, very fast, and he's getting to wherever the play is, and he's definitely making a positive contribution. Can't say enough positive things about Denzel Burke. We talked about Tyleik Williams. Cody Simon is starting to I think the light is starting to turn on at the linebacker position. We talked about the defensive line with Jack Sawyer and JTT. There's some things that if things start to continue to move in a positive way, this could make for an exciting team by the end of 2021.
I agree with you. I think let's see how it plays out. It's a long season,
yeah,
even though even though we're already 4 games through it.
A third.
Yeah.
A third of the way, man.
Third of the way through the season. Well, we did warn people just a few weeks ago not to take it for granted, because this can happen. One last thing before we totally close the book on Kayvon Pope is that I thought it was an interesting public show of support today from Maurice Clarett, who said that he hoped that Ryan Day would give Kayvon another chance if obviously if he wants one and if he works through his issues, because and Maurice Clarett knows this better than anybody. A mistake you make as a kid can hurt you the rest of your life if you don't have the proper people in place and the proper support in place to help you through it. So I thought that was an interesting take and a very mature take from Maurice Clarett.
Yeah, Maurice Clarett, I had the privilege of hearing him speak a few years ago. Just tremendously impressive individual. And you're right. I mean, sometimes the things that are said or done when you're young can have a dramatic impact, negatively for a long time. So I'm not sure if Kayvon Pope wants to come back. I agree with you, though, that, it would be, interesting if Coach Day would allow him to come back if Kayvon Pope was so inclined to do so.
Yeah. So we'll have to see how it goes. But until then, I guess we wish him and Dallas Gant the best. And speaking of transfer portal Buckeyes, Jamison Williams, he returned a kickoff for a touchdown for Alabama this weekend.
Yeah, he's looking as good as advertised. I think he found the perfect situation for himself in Alabama. And, again, I have no problem with the fact that he left. Whatever he was told by the coaching staff was not to his liking, and he exercised his right to find an opportunity that he thought would suit him better.
Yeah, well, and when you look at Ohio State and you see Chris Olave and you see Garrett Wilson and you see Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's kind of, where are you going to put this guy?
Right. I don't think he wanted to be relegated to a backup / you can return kickoffs and punts, and even though he's been doing that well for Alabama, that I think, he definitely saw himself as a starter, and Alabama certainly agrees with him.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick trip through the Big Ten, Chip. We've already mentioned Rutgers and Michigan. Michigan wins that 20-13 in Ann Arbor. And that game it looked like it was going to be a blowout at one point. It was 20-3. And then in the second half, Rutgers came out, made some defensive adjustments to stop Michigan's run game. And I don't recall if they ever did get one, but it was pretty deep in the second half. And I hadn't even noticed this, but the announcers say Michigan has not had a first down this half. And I don't know if they ever got one, but boy, Rutgers shut down the Wolverines in the second half of that game.
Yeah, if anything, that would be very foreboding. I think for Michigan, going into this weekend, now granted, they've got issues of their own at Wisconsin, but the Badgers are very, very stout defensively. And I think just the idea that, okay, we want to line up and just run the ball. If you're Michigan, you're going to need more than that. And I think, Rutgers is certainly, they don't have nearly the personnel that Wisconsin does. So I think Wisconsin, I think they're going to come out with a win. I don't think it's going to be high scoring because Wisconsin's very, 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 Graham Mertz has regressed immensely at quarterback, but I think Wisconsin's going to have enough to beat Michigan this coming weekend.
Well, we shall see. I do think that if Isaiah Pacheco can go to Ann Arbor and get 107 yards on 20 carries behind a Rutgers offensive line, I think I like the idea of Travion Henderson and what he could do behind Ohio State's offensive line.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I think, when it comes to, Wisconsin, they traditionally have a very, very strong running game. So I do like, in terms of the game plan for this coming week, I think Wisconsin will take it to Michigan on the ground.
Yeah, well, they're going to have to do it on the ground because, as you said, Graham Mertz has regressed. I will put it a different way. Graham Mertz right now, Chip, sucks. He sucks. They went to they went to Chicago to Soldier Field to play Notre Dame in a quote unquote neutral site game. Notre Dame wins that one 41-13. Graham Mertz threw for 240 yards, but he was 18 of 41. And I will tell you, I've seen multiple Wisconsin games this year. And when Wisconsin gets inside the 30, Graham Mertz is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is. And considering, like I said, they have, multiple running backs. They have a very good tight end in Jake Ferguson. He's just not. It seems as though like from game one of 2020, it's just been just a complete regression that you just kind of wonder what's going on. I think, even with that being said, I do think Wisconsin is the more talented team, and I think going on the road into Camp Randall, I don't think the Wolverines offensively have enough to come away with a win.
Yeah, we will see how Wisconsin bounces back from that. They're going to come out as a desperate team. I don't think you ever want to face a desperate, backed into a corner Badger, Chip. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it's probably not a good idea. They're a wounded animal right now, and they're dangerous. And I will tell you that they need more from their running game. They need more from their quarterback, but their defense is good. And I think they need to get more from their running game because Malusi only ran for 54 yards on Saturday, and when Wisconsin was in a third and long situations, Graham Mertz just was not delivering. And if you're Jack Cohn, you got to feel a little bit of vindication there after that game. Although he did get hurt in the third quarter, and
right,
Mertz threw I think 2 pick sixes in this game.
I think so. Yeah, like I said, all of a sudden it just everything turned when Wisconsin they kicked off to Notre Dame. Notre Dame returned it for a touchdown, and then all of a sudden the momentum was just gone for Wisconsin.
Yeah. All right, so Iowa played Colorado State, a very surprisingly close game in Iowa City, a 24-14 win there for the Hawkeyes. That was 14-7 at the half in favor of Colorado State. Iowa shut them out in the second half, 17-0, outscored them down the stretch, and restored some order. But a slow start for the Hawkeyes, so they're up to top 5 team in the country, and maybe they got a little full of themselves, but they were able to come away with the win.
Yeah, and this coming Friday, they actually, I think they have, I don't want to say their first legitimate test, because they did open up the season against Indiana. I mean, they throttled Indiana, but they're going on the road, one of those dreadful Friday night games that the Big Ten implemented a few years ago. They're actually, I'm just so against it. But that being said, they're at Maryland, and Maryland is definitely playing better. You know, the fact that it's a Friday night, Maryland has a very good passing offense. Like you said, Iowa kind of struggled with Colorado State. Maybe they were, you know, like as you said, you know, like overconfident. I don't know, but I think this is going to be a good test for Iowa to kind of see, you know, how good they really are going on the road against a much improved Maryland team.
Yeah. Penn State played Villanova, a Villanova team that was 3-0, but I didn't really expect a lot of fight from Villanova. They win 38-17 Penn State, but Villanova scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make that look a little bit better than it was.
Yeah, Penn State's looking good. They've got Indiana this coming weekend. I think Penn State has definitely improved. Now, again, you know, some of the more challenging games are on the horizon for Penn State, but they definitely are showing themselves to be a team to be reckoned with within the Big Ten East.
Yep. Nebraska, Scott Frost loses another close game. Sparty looked like they were going to be. I expected the Spartans to win this game easily, but it wasn't that way, and the Spartans needed to tie the game in the fourth, and then it went into overtime, and Michigan State wins it 23-20 after Adrian Martinez threw an interception in overtime. And so Sparty escapes and is now 4-0, Chip. The Spartans are 2 wins away from bowl eligibility. Nebraska falls to 2-3.
Now, Nebraska, I think they're going to get back on the winning side. I think, like you said, beware. You know, I don't know if they are nearly as ferocious as a wounded badger, but I think a wounded Cornhusker. They're playing Northwestern this weekend. I think Nebraska is going to come out and win that game. I think that they are definitely, you know, in certain ways that they're snake bit, but I think that they're just better than Northwestern. And again, props to you, because you predicted Michigan State to do well. I did not. You know, like you said, that they're 4-0. I think they'll be 5-0 as of this weekend. They play Western Kentucky. So yeah, Mel Tucker has done a tremendous job quickly rebuilding the Spartans. Yeah,
I mean, this team is believing in themselves, and I think they're getting, you know, better quarterback play this year. Their defense is playing better than it was. So look out for the Spartans. You can't take them for granted anymore. Probably the biggest surprise of the weekend is Minnesota losing at home to Bowling Green 14-10.
That is beyond embarrassing, because we talked earlier about how Akron is one of the worst teams in Division I football. Minnesota arguably lost to the worst team in Division I football. I saw something. I'm not a gambling type, but I thought I saw something on Twitter that this was technically the worst gambling loss in terms of, you know, how heavily favored Minnesota was since Appalachian State upset Michigan back in 2007.
Wow. Well, with NIL, you don't have to throw games anymore, kids. You could just go get an NIL deal. No need to shave points. Minnesota, 10 points against Bowling Green. And that's in a game with Trace and Potts running for 141 yards. So I'm not sure. I didn't get to see any of that game, but I don't think I don't think it's what PJ Fleck wants to see. It's certainly not going to make Ohio State's win over Minnesota look any better. So bad for multiple folks. Northwestern gets a win 35-6 at home over the Ohio Bobcats, who dropped to 0-4. The Bobcats are, again, not great, and Northwestern gets an easy win, which would indicate that Ohio is not great.
No. If anything, my compliments to now retired Ohio head coach Frank Solich. He retired right before the season. Maybe he saw what was coming and thought, okay, people love me here. I don't want to, ruin my reputation. So he got out. But yeah, like I said a few moments ago, I think Northwestern, they're taking advantage of the teams that they have on the schedule, but they're not looking good. And I think, they're going on the road to Nebraska. I really do think they're going to come away with another loss.
Yeah, Northwestern's just 2-2. They've not been impressive, and they certainly haven't done anything to indicate that they will compete for the Big Ten West title this year. Speaking of the Big Ten West, in probably the game that everyone who didn't see it is glad they didn't see it, Purdue beating Illinois 13-9 in West Lafayette.
Yeah, that was, a major slugfest. I think, if anything, kind of speaks volumes of, I think, both teams are kind of struggling offensively. And I think both teams are, if there is a strength to each team, it is on their defense. So I know Bielema was upset that they didn't capitalize, but credit to Purdue for doing what they needed to gut out a win against Illinois.
Yeah, they had a 156-yard rusher in Joshua McCray. Illinois did not get in the end zone, so no one to blame but themselves for not finishing drives. Purdue only scored 13 points, so it's not like you needed to do a lot more offensively to get the win there. But Purdue is a very quiet 3-1 this year so far. You talked about Maryland, resurgent Maryland, 2 wins from bowl eligibility at 4-0 after a 37-16 win over Kent State at home. And Maryland's a better team at home, so what you said earlier about them, I think you are right. I think Iowa's going to have to be a little bit on their toes for this game.
And this is the kind of game though that I think Maryland, they were earlier in the year, they were fortunate to defeat. We just talked about Illinois, so I think this is the kind of game where, this can speak volumes about how well Maryland has improved, under Mike Laxley. Like I said, I want to give credit where credit is due. I think Maryland offensively, their passing game is certainly something that has me concerned as an Ohio State fan because they're on the horizon after Rutgers. But I want to see how Iowa, which is very good defensively, how they handle going on the road. So I think it could make for an interesting Friday night.
Yeah, Terps have been, like I said, they've been much better at home, especially offensively. Tonga Vailoa has been much better at home than he's been on the road throughout his career at Maryland. So maybe just feels a little more comfortable at home. He threw for 384 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Golden Flashes, who dropped to 1-3. And it seems like every bad team in the MAC played a Big Ten team this week.
And the thing is, like Kent State, because they played Iowa, and then played Maryland, and like you said, yeah, like Kent State is traditionally a doormat within the MAC. I just think that they, in terms of just the unluck of the draw, so to speak, in terms of their schedule, it's just they kind of did not represent themselves well. But we'll see. In terms of Maryland, that Maryland Iowa game, I think is going to kind of, at least for me, is going to kind of give me an idea as to how Ohio State may do when Maryland comes to town on October 9th.
Yeah. And wrapping things up, the Indiana Hoosiers improved to 2-2 by the skin of their teeth. The Hoosiers nip Western Kentucky 33-31, although Western Kentucky needed a touchdown late to pull within 2. Indiana still just doesn't look like the Hoosiers of the last couple years.
No, they don't. And I think Penn State will take them. I think you were probably right in preseason thinking that Indiana has kind of fallen back. I don't know if it was a case of, maybe it was too much too soon in terms of the accolades for Indiana. I don't know if it's Michael Penix not playing up to the level that everyone expected or believes that he should. But I think Indiana's going to have a tough weekend against Penn State.
Yeah, Penix threw for 373 yards in this game, but he needed 53 attempts and 35 completions to get there. So against a Western Kentucky team that is now 1-2. So, but that was on the road. I don't know how tough an environment it is in Western Kentucky. I don't imagine it's like going to Auburn or LSU or someplace like that.
Right.
Anyway, that's our trip through the Big Ten, and there were some strange games across the country in the top 25. I don't want to get too much into them because it was, most of it was chalk, but there were some strange games. Oklahoma is now a very unimpressive 4-0 with a 16-13 win against West Virginia. That was one that stood out. Texas A&M, 7th in the country, getting beat by Arkansas 20-10. Clemson getting beaten in double overtime by NC State. Clemson is now 2-2, Chip. That's not looking good for the Tigers.
It's not. And I think it'd be we're like I said, we're a third of the way through the season. I think it would be presumptuous to say, Clemson is definitely eliminated from the college football playoff, but it's not looking good. I think, the fact that they have 2 losses, that they haven't looked impressive this season. It's more than likely Clemson's going to be sitting out the college football playoff for the first time in a long while.
Yeah, Georgia Tech in one of the more surprising games beats North Carolina 45-22. Auburn struggles with Georgia State, wins 34-24. They had to score 15 points in the fourth quarter just to get a 10-point win.
Yeah, Auburn, I think that there might be, because those fans, you want to talk about turning on, when things are going well. I'm being completely serious.
I know.
So Brian Harsin, I think, I'm sure that the temperature is starting to rise for him, even though he's only in his first year down there.
Yep. All right, Chip. Only thing left for us to do is talk about Rutgers and give our score predictions and our picks to click. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights, we've talked about them quite a bit already. Noah Vedral running the RPOs has been very efficient this year. Ohio State has been vulnerable on the edges, so that's a little bit concerning. Isaiah Pacheco is getting better as the season goes on. That's also concerning. They have good starting receivers, at least, in Bo Melton and Aaron Cruikshanks, so that's going to create some challenges for the Ohio State secondary. How do you see this Rutgers offense against the Ohio State defense matchup?
I think Ohio State is going to do everything they possibly can to shut down the run first. That's not to say that I think that the Ohio State secondary has distinguished themselves enough, in terms of their play this season. But if it was me, I would challenge Rutgers to effectively run the ball, because even though Vedral is a threat on that run pass option, I really think if you can make Rutgers one dimensional, and shut down their running game, I think it just bodes much better for Ohio State.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Ohio State has figured out how to deal with bunch formation when they're in man coverage. We didn't see a lot of Akron trying to attack it that way when Ohio State was in man. And Ohio State's been playing more zones. We'll see how they do against Noah Vedral. One thing to watch for with Rutgers, if they get into a 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 situation, they usually bring Johnny Langan in. He's their running quarterback to do a little wildcat, read option. So that's something that's going to be a concern in short yardage play. So Ohio State's going to have to keep Rutgers in manageable situations on 3rd down. Don't give them 1 or 2 yards to go, because that's kind of been their bread and butter at picking those up.
Yeah, 3rd downs have definitely been a disaster for Ohio State defensively. So you can only hope that let's hope for a lot more of like 3rd and 7 versus like anything like 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, like you said.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, Chip, it's going to be interesting to see, after shutting down the Michigan running game in the second half, if Ohio State can identify how to attack that defense and open some holes up for Travion Henderson and potentially Master Teague and Mayan Williams as well. I think Teague made some strides this week. I think he had a much better yards per carry average than Mayan Williams, even though Mayan Williams got to play some in the first half and behind the starters on offensive line, and Teague was more of a second half guy. I think Teague made some strides this week.
He did, and I definitely think that if ever there was a case for Ryan Day to stick with the running game, especially going on the road with inexperienced quarterbacks, let's just call it for what it is, potentially not 100% healthy quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I think that commitment to the running game is going to be absolutely essential. It might be frustrating at times, but I think if ever there was a time, I think Ohio State needs to be completely committed to the running game against Rutgers.
Yeah, and again, in passing situations, Ohio State has to protect. And Fatukasi is the guy who is going to be coming in on the blitz from his linebacker position. He's the guy they got to pick up, so he's going to be the responsibility of probably the running back most of the time, maybe tight ends. They're going to have to get him blocked. And also, the defensive line for Rutgers has done a pretty good job also in the sack department. Like I said, 14 sacks through 4 games. That's not too shabby. And they looked pretty good in the game against Michigan, especially that second half. So protecting the quarterback is going to have to be a priority as well, and getting the ball out quickly, making quick reads, getting it out, hitting Olave, hitting Jackson Smith and Jigba, hitting Garrett Wilson, and letting them get some yards after catch. So if they can hit some stuff early in the game, maybe they can loosen that defense up a little bit. But what do you see as being the key to this game?
I think, we've danced around it enough. I think that run pass option, Noah Vedral, I think, not allowing him to, he's going to get his yards, but not, allowing him to extend drives, from, okay, if you have him in, on second and, let's just say like 2nd and 7, if he does a run pass option, let's make it 3rd and 5 versus 3rd and 1. You know what I mean? So yeah. I think that's going to be critical. I think, making it more difficult. If Ohio State can make Rutgers need to throw the ball to be able to keep drives going, I think that's going to be, one of the major things that I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
All right, it is time, Chip. Picks to click and score predictions. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Who is your pick to click for Ohio State?
All right, I'm going to go. It's not off the grid, but it's going to be a little bit surprising potentially. Okay. We talked about the idea of being committed to the running game, and as you know, as our listeners know, the idea of a successful running game lends itself to play action passes, and I'm going to go with Jeremy Ruckert. I think that he is going to be the beneficiary. I think there's going to be a lot of concentration by the Rutgers secondary on the Ohio State wide receivers, and I think Ruckert might be the beneficiary of some well-timed play-action passes.
All right, I am going to go with the passing game as well. I'm going to take the slot receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba in this one. I think that Rutgers will try to do what they can with safety help to try to take out Olave and Wilson as much as they can, and I think that's going to open some areas of the field up for Jackson Smith and Jigba underneath to make those types of catches that KJ Hill used to make. And then, of course, Smith and Jigba may be much shiftier and much better after the catch than KJ Hill, so I think that he might have a big game in this game.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Completely makes sense.
All right, let's turn our attention towards the defensive side of the football. And I've been saying this, I've been continuously saying that a defensive end is going to have a good game, and it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know what that says. But there were a couple of them out this past week as well. So I'm going to stay away from the defensive ends until they earn my trust back. And I'm going to say Antoine Jackson.
Okay. I can see it.
Now for a defensive tackle, a pick to click for a tackle might only be like 3 tackles and a tackle for loss, but that's they don't put up big numbers.
He might be in line for it. Might be in line for it. You mentioned him positively earlier in the show, and I agree with you. And I think that definitely when you talk about how things are starting to kind of the light turning on, so to speak, I think he's starting to emerge definitely as a playmaker. I'm going to go with Ronnie Hickman. I think the New Jersey player, an opportunity to kind of show how talented he is in his home state. I'm going to go with Ronnie Hickman.
I think it's a good pick. I think he was definitely one of my considerations. All right, score prediction time, Chip. What do you think is going to be on the scoreboard when that final whistle blows on Saturday at 3:30? 3:30 is when the kickoff is, not when the final whistle will
blow. I would love it. I would love it if we had a game of like yesteryear when Ohio State would be dominant. It's not happening. This Rutgers team is too improved. They're at home. They know that. That this is an Ohio State team that is not firing 100% on every cylinder. I don't agree with the Vegas odds makers. I think last I saw 17 points. I don't see that. I'm going Ohio State 34, Rutgers 21.
34-21. Let me lock you in there. I'm going to go a little higher scoring on both sides of the ball. I'm going to say the Buckeyes win it 40-27 in one of those annoying games that is frustratingly close until Ohio State gets a late score to put it away.
Yeah, that's kind of I definitely consider this is going to be annoying. It's going to be you're going to be like, oh my God, the exasperation, I'm sure social media, will treat it well like Ohio State fans always do.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think it's going to be – this is kind of where we talked earlier. My belief is that commitment to the running game. We were praising Master Teague. I wouldn't be surprised if, somebody like Master Teague late in the game is called upon, Mayan Williams. Okay, we need to just control – control the line of scrimmage, hold on to the ball, just kind of, all right, this is kind of what I envision in the second half, Ohio State getting some scores late. So, yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a frustrating game for a lot of fans, but hopefully a step in the right direction.
Yeah, this team for Rutgers has really taken on the hard-nosed attitude of Greg Schiano, and it doesn't go away. This team doesn't go away. They don't back down. They don't stop. They don't stop playing until the final whistle. And Michigan found that out on Saturday after getting out to a bit of a lead. So I think it's going to be incumbent on Ohio State to show the same level of fight and intensity for the entire game. And I almost took Mayan Williams as my pick to click because I think this is one of those games where a team that's hitting hard and is giving you everything they got, this might be the first game where maybe TreVeyon Henderson experiences a little adversity, and so I almost took Mayan Williams because I think he's a physical enough runner to where he would maybe actually even welcome that kind of a game.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just think it's going to be the term frustrating. It's going to be that without I will be immensely surprised if it is not.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll come back next week. We'll talk about it, see how it went, and hopefully things will go well for the Scarlet and Gray. One other thing that we didn't mention is the Penn State game. It's going to be a special uniform game, Chip. Color rush.
I'm just not into that whole. I mean, it's still nobody knows if it's going to be a night kickoff. But anytime that they do the special uniforms, I'm not a fan. I understand why they do it, but I'm old school.
That's because Ohio State has the best uniforms.
That's right. Exactly.
My understanding of the color rush is that it's all scarlet. Actually, I mean they had some mock-ups on the Ohio State website, and I'm sorry, but the monochromatic look. It doesn't matter if it's Oregon or Arizona State or any of these teams that do it, West Virginia. To me, when you do that, it looks like you're wearing pajamas.
Yeah, like I said, I'm just not a big fan. I don't understand. I know why they do it because supposedly the recruits think it's great and the players. That's all fine and good. To me, you have an opportunity. If anything, if I could make a uniform standard, it would be you'd have for the Scarlet jersey, you'd have gray on the sleeves, and bring back the large number, the large numerals that you used to see back in the 90s. Absolutely okay. That's what you need.
Yeah,
I don't know what's tough about this.
Yeah, so. And I don't mind the little logo on the front. At the base of the collar is fine.
Right.
But I don't like when teams. Ohio State doesn't do this, but a lot of teams around the country. I'm tired of seeing Cougars written on the front of your uniform or the school's name written on the front of your uniform. Hey, act like people should know who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you shouldn't say Beavers or Arizona State or whatever on the front of your uniform. It should just be a nice, clean look with your numbers. And I said, maybe you want that school logo small right there on the collar. That's fine, but Ohio State doesn't put Ohio State across the front of their shirts. They don't need to do that.
Nope.
You know who we are.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Chip, where can people find you and your work on the internet?
I can be found on Twitter at Chip Minnich, last name spelled Minnich, and I'm a contributor to Athlon Sports. I know I gave you my score prediction for this game, but I also have some other thoughts about some things that may take place. So look for that article to drop later this week on athlonsports.com.
All right. You can find me on Twitter as well. I'm at Mike36Fan, and I usually live tweet during the games. I probably won't get to do it much in this one because I'll probably have to leave at halftime and watch the rest of it later, which is even more annoying because I have a previous commitment that I can't get out of, but we'll do what we can. But also you can find me at Buckeye Scoop. I'm the grumpy old Buckeye. You can find my column on the morning after the game. Every week I tell you what really fried my bacon, what really ground my gears, as it were, what made me go out on the lawn and yell at clouds. The things that basically annoyed me during the game, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a heaping dose of negativity. Some of it's tongue-in-cheek, some of it's real. And I think a lot of it's going to be real this week against Rutgers. But
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
I think you might be right.
All right, folks, that'll do it. We'll be back next week to break down the Rutgers game and look ahead, as we always do. Thanks again to our guest, Greg Patuto from onthebanks.com. Go check his stuff out over there and get their side of the story and see what they're thinking heading into the game. And we appreciate Greg, his time, and for stopping by. This is 2 years in a row. You almost forget that we had guests last year during the COVID season.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was such a strange year.
Yeah.
So.
All right, that'll do it. We have one thing left to do, like we always do at the end. Go Bucks!
Go Bucks!